When I was 16 years old, I played in a band with some friends from school. Our drummer, Randy, lived with his family at the top of a mountain about 10 miles out of town. We practiced in a little building on their property to avoid the noise complaints we would surely get in town. The mountain was a labyrinth of unpaved roads, and the few houses there were separated from each other by stretches of dense forest. I had met a few of Randy's neighbors, and they mostly seemed like normal people who just wanted to live closer to nature. However, Randy's stepdad, Jack, a 6'5", tattooed ex-biker, warned us that he had heard stories of people moving there to hide their drug operations deep in the woods. Around this time, I had started dating a new girl, but because of her strict family, we had only been able to see each other at school. However, it turned out she had a friend who lived on the same mountain as Randy. She decided to sleep over at her house on a Friday so that I could come and see her there after practice. I passed the directions she gave me on to Randy, and while he seemed uncertain about them, he agreed to help me find the house. After band rehearsal broke up that Friday, Randy and I got in my car and started trying to follow my girlfriend's directions. The first couple of turns were easy enough, but soon we found ourselves on a narrow, winding road lined with tall trees that completely blotted out the moonlight. The air felt heavier up there, the silence more pronounced, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. We were supposed to turn off that road somewhere, but between the darkness and my girlfriend's vague directions, we had no idea which of the several narrow paths leading farther off into the woods was the right one. As the trees closed in around us, the shadows seemed to come alive, and an eerie silence settled over the car. It felt like the kind of night where anything could happen, and none of it would be good. After a few minutes, we decided we must have missed the road, so I turned around at the first house I saw to take another look. The house was dark and seemed almost abandoned, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. Once again, we couldn't decide which road was the one we were looking for, not wanting to take a wrong turn and end up in the middle of someone's private property in the dead of night. We turned around at another house to make one more pass. It wasn't long after that I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw a pair of headlights closing in quickly, much more quickly than was reasonable on this rough dirt road in the pitch blackness. I mentioned this to Randy, but he waved it off. "Probably just some crazy redneck," he said, not exactly easing my nerves. "Just let them pass." I slowed to a crawl and pulled as close to the side of the road as I safely could, waiting for the car to pass. Instead of going around, though, it got right on my bumper. At this point, we were starting to panic, and I was becoming convinced we had somehow pissed off one of the drug dealers Jack had warned us about. I sped up and the car kept pace. When I accelerated even more, they finally passed. But rather than continuing on, the driver performed a perfect bootleg turn, sliding to a stop a few yards ahead, now facing my car with their high beams on. Needless to say, Randy and I were losing it, screaming random obscenities for a few seconds before either of us was able to think straight. Summoning a driving skill I didn't know I had, I threw the car into reverse, floored it, and somehow managed to get turned around in the direction of Randy's house without ending up in a ditch. I think I took the other driver by surprise because we had a pretty good head start before he took off in pursuit. At the speed we were going, it only took a couple of minutes to get back to Randy's house, but the other car tailed us the whole way. The night was a blur of adrenaline and terror. We whipped into the driveway, almost jumping out of my car before it had stopped. The other vehicle, which I could now see was a police car with the lights and markings removed, slid to a stop behind us, blocking us in. Randy and I sprinted for the front door and did the only thing we could think to do in our panicked state. We yelled for Jack to come and save our skins. Jack, who was sitting in his recliner watching TV and wearing only a pair of shorts, calmly got up and walked out onto the front porch. As he did so, a chubby old man, probably in his late 50s, climbed out of the other car but immediately stopped behind his open door when he saw the big, half-naked biker dude who was now standing between him and us. It only took a couple of questions from Jack, who was a nice guy but scary as hell when he wanted to be, before our pursuer was reduced to stammering nervously. It turns out that, unknown to me, both times I had turned around it had been in his driveway. After seeing my headlights for the second time, he decided to chase us down, assuming we were up to something illegal. After explaining himself, he angrily informed us that he was a retired state trooper and that he had radioed for the police to come and arrest us for trespassing. He then jumped back into his car and took off. Unsurprisingly, no police ever arrived, and we ended up laughing the whole thing off as a random encounter with a crazy but harmless old man. Still, it was enough to scare me into never venturing too far from Randy's house again when I was on the mountain. One evening, a few weeks later, I received a call from my girlfriend. She had heard about our harrowing experience and was worried. She suggested meeting somewhere safer, somewhere more public. It was a welcome relief, and we decided to meet at a diner in town. The change of scenery helped, but the memory of that night remained etched in my mind. Years later, Randy and I drifted apart, as friends often do. But every now and then, when I drive past a dense forest or hear the distant roar of a motorcycle, I remember that night on the mountain. It serves as a reminder of the thin line between thrill and danger and the importance of making smart choices.